Welcome to the Philly Prime podcast. We're joining forces again today with Mob Talk Sitdown. I'm Dave Schratweiser. Have a very special guest today. We're going to start a series of podcasts and YouTube videos here, talking with a guy who a lot of people don't know, but a very important person in the Philadelphia Police Department, just retired. His name is John Taggart, 32 years on the police department, 28 years in the crime scene unit. And he's the guy who collects all the evidence, takes all the pictures, and preps the evidence for a court case for the prosecutors to prosecute individuals. One of his specialties, unintended I'm sure, is mob hits, where he's processed mob hit scenes and or vehicles used in mob hits, things like that. John, welcome to the show. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me here, Dave.
And listen, you're retired. How are you liking retired life so far?
It's different. I haven't gotten used to it yet. It's only been 2 months, so it's different.
Yeah. When you work hard every day for 32 years in the police department, it's a different speed, I guess, right?
Yeah, there's a purpose in your life, and now you got to refine that purpose.
Yeah. Cool. John, walk me through. I said 32 years in the police department, 28 in the crime scene unit. How did you get into the crime scene unit? Want to go to work at the crime scene unit?
Actually happened by accident. I had been, before I was a police officer, I was a photographer in the Archaeology and Anthropology Museum at the University of Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
I'd been there for almost 10 years and decided I wanted to be a cop against my wife's wishes.
Yeah.
So when I told her, we'd been married probably about 5 years, I told her, I think I want to be a cop. Wasn't too happy about that. She had married a photographer and did not want me to become a cop.
Yeah.
So I joined the academy. After graduating the academy, I went to the 18th district in West Philly. I was a patrol officer there for about 4 years. And then I had a partner who wanted to go to the crime scene unit and said, come on, we'll go together. We'll go on the buddy plan.
Right.
And he's an inspector now. He didn't get it, and you know how it went. I got it, and
yeah.
I felt terrible, that he didn't get it and I got it. But it's worked out probably for both of us really well.
Yeah, John, talk to me about how many crime scenes do you think you've processed over the course of your career? And I realize it's 28 years, so it's going to be a big number, but ballpark it for me: crime scenes and murder scenes, if you would.
I've tried to sit down and think about this a lot. You hate to say it, but it's such a violent city, and it's only gotten more violent. So when I first got there, we would handle burglaries and robberies and ag assaults. And probably my last 10 years, we just handled homicides. So it's got to be, I've been asked to do a lot. So it's got to be in the thousands, like both.
Yeah.
I've never really sat down and thought how many, but there's so many different components of a homicide scene. So to say how many have you actually worked on, where you could work on a car,
yeah,
or a secondary scene. It's astronomical. And there's not a lot of people in our unit. So, by default, you just handle a ton.
Yeah. Okay. This is a very important job, but it's also a very gruesome job. You have to have a certain kind of mentality, I'm assuming, to handle a job like this, to be on some pretty horrific crime scenes, that kind of thing. What's the mentality factor here approaching situations like that?
I get asked this all the time, like, how do you sleep and how do you, once you get into it, it's harder not to be at that scene, like a big scene, like you see a scene on TV and you're off, you just want to be there. But eventually they're going to ask you to do something on that case. So I don't know the mentality part of it. Maybe I'm just a blockhead or something, but it doesn't affect me the way people think it should.
Yeah. And I've noticed that over the years, seeing you at crime scene after crime scene after crime scene, that you seem pretty chill and totally focused on what you're doing. And I know you take that very important. It's very important to you to do an accurate, precise, deliberate job so you can give prosecutors and homicide detectives and other detectives the best evidence they can have.
Yeah, because even though these scenes are so horrific, and they're people's worst days. You know that if you don't do a good job, that you're going to lose it in court, or it's never going to go to court. You're never going to get an arrest. So the payback to any job is there's an arrest made, and a rightful arrest, not just any arrest. So that keeps you focused, but you still have to. I mean, you still have to find fun in the job. And, towards the end, maybe it wasn't so much as much fun, and you that's when it's time to go.
Yeah. For those who don't know, and I know because I was there, but John was invited up with crime scene unit members to process some of the scene up at the 9/11 in New York at the Twin Towers after that horrific day. And you spent a appreciable amount of time up there, as did I. And I saw John up there working a few times, and it was good to see a familiar face among the horrific memories that were being created there every single day. John, walk me through that. How did that kind of affect you, if you don't mind me asking?
I don't. I don't. Again, like, you wanted to be asked to go. I remember when there was grumblings that we were going to go. The lieutenant asked who wants to go, and like, I'd be always the first one to I want to go.
Yeah.
And I think the first day we sent one member up, and then it looked like maybe we weren't going to go. But John Timoney was the police commissioner at the time in Philly, who was a big wig up in New York at one time. And he sent word down on like the second day, I want you guys to go up. And I got to drive. I drove a Philly police car to New York, and like, we didn't know anything, like where we were going to sleep or stay or how long we were going to be there. And I'll tell you, the New York guys, I still have really good friends up in New York. Could not have been more inviting to us. And
and you guys were there for quite a bit of time, right? You were processing scenes on, if I have it correctly, on top of buildings that were adjacent to the Trade Center, because debris from the explosion and the buildings collapsed ended up on the tops of those buildings. Am I right about that?
Yeah, our first day we went with the evidence collection team, and the night prior they had found a large pool of plane parts and body parts at the scene on the roof. I don't know. See, I never really studied it, because when you're in it, you don't really. I've looked back now and tried to figure out what buildings we were on, and one was kind of like a rounded top building, and there was just. I remember sitting on the roof and looking at the body parts and the plane parts, and looking up like, how did they get here? Because even with all them buildings down, New York is still like a cavernous area.
Yeah.
And the trajectory to get these parts on this roof just didn't equate in my mind.
Yeah.
And,
shows you the power, I guess, of the planes hitting the towers and the towers then collapsing like that.
Yeah, I've kind of figured out some stuff now. Never really went back and looked it over. I know when we got back, I went down the shore for a week. I didn't stick around in the city.
Yeah.
So,
John, when you come on a crime scene, a homicide scene, walk us through how you do this, and then we're going to talk about one of the mob hits, the Ron Turchi murder in October of 1999, because you worked on that particular case. But when you come on a homicide scene like that, let's say it's in a car or in a building, how do you process the scene? Walk me through it in a shortened version of it.
A lot of times you have limited amount of information, and I will tell you this: I don't like to have a whole lot, because early on in investigations you find out that information is wrong, and it only hinders the investigation. So, as my part, like my whole existence is to document the scene, not necessarily figure out what happened. I mean, as you get older, your tools that you've acquired help you figure out who and how a crime was committed. But early on, it's just document, tag number, the VIN number of the car. Does it match? Photographing is so huge, and I think that's how I got to the crime scene unit so fast, because the advancements in forensics, the two biggest advancements in my career are digital photography, and DNA. When I first got to the crime scene unit, DNA didn't exist. I mean, it existed, but nobody knew how to use it.
Yeah, 1995-ish we're talking about, right? Yep.
Yeah. Well, I got to the unit in '96, and when we would only collect blood and have it typed in the ABO blood typing system. You didn't ask for DNA.
Yeah.
And then probably right when I got there is when it started to be used more, and it was only used for stranger rapes when it first came out, and then it would take like a year to get back, and then there was no database for it, so it was limited to a suspect. Like there was no computer, there was no CODIS at the time.
Yeah.
And the digital photography. I mean, we used to shoot negative film, and I go around teach now. People don't know what negative film was.
Yeah.
And then you had to come back and process it,
right,
and then print it.
Yeah.
So now, and I was always told film is cheap, so don't worry about how many pictures you have to take.
Yeah.
You know, digital photography is even cheaper.
Yeah.
Like it's unlimited how many photographs you can take.
All right, so you take the pictures, it's on a disc, and you have the disc, and you're ready to go. Pretty much, you don't have to do any developing now. And the DNA, that's probably one of the most important things you do now is look for areas where there might be DNA on a vehicle or at a crime scene and collect it. Correct?
Correct. And knowing where to look, and because you want to also help out the chemists that are going to extract the DNA. You don't want to collect 1,000 swabs that have nothing to do other than you've collected them.
Yeah. So you target areas that you know somebody might have put their hand on it, or a finger, or the back of their hand on it, that kind of thing. Somewhere where you can get DNA off the surface.
Yeah, that's exactly what you want to do.
Yeah. So let me walk you to over your career. You and I were discussing a few times. You've actually been on the scene and or processed a vehicle and part of a scene after the fact on several mob hits in Philadelphia. I think we counted 5 or 6. Am I right about that?
That's about right. Yeah. I mean, if I go back and think over it, I mean, I'll tell you that they weren't at the time. They were, you could tell they were important because of the news media and all there. But when I first got there, like we didn't think much. Oh my God, this is a mob murder.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't treated like that.
Yeah. You just did it same way you did any other homicide scene, that kind of situation.
Pretty much, but you knew based on the amount of people that were there and the news media there, and how much TV attention it got, that it was bigger than what you thought.
Yeah. Let's talk about the Ron Turchi murder. It was in October of '99. According to everything we've learned about this murder, Ron Turchi was murdered somewhere in South Philadelphia, shot in the head. There's a picture of him right there. Shot in the head and put in a vehicle. And then I'm going to let you pick up the story from there, because that vehicle is then found several days later, parked in South Philly. I think it was 7th and Federal or 9th and Christian, right in that area on the street. It was, I think, a Toyota Corolla. And what happened? There's the car right there. What happened from there? Right at that point, it's just a car that you guys think might have been involved in the hit. What happens to that car, and where does it end up, and how do you end up on this?
So the car, I don't know specifics about investigation part. Mine is completely with the evidence. So the car is found somewhere where you said, down there in South Philly. People are already investigating it. I'm sure South Detectives is investigating it as a missing person. I don't think it got higher than that until we find the car. They find the car and they tow it to the police garage up at McAllister and Whitaker Street. Mm-hmm. That's where we process all our cars.
That's where you do your best work. Am I right about that?
The last 2 years, I've pretty much just done cars.
Yeah. Okay. So the car gets up there. What happens?
I remember specifically, we were out on a deputy's house got burglarized, and we were processing that house, me and my partner, and we got a phone call while we were up there I don't think we had cell phones back then, so we probably got a radio call to
Yeah.
call headquarters. We call headquarters, and they're saying, "Listen, they think it's mob related. He's missing." So we get the basic information, but they found his car. His car is up at McAllister and Whitaker. Can you process it? And I said, yeah. I remember we were almost done handling the burglary,
Yeah.
and which was up in the Northeast. And the police garage is in East Division, towards the lower end of the Northeast. I said, well, we'll take care of that on the way back to headquarters. And then I remember specifically, my boss said, oh, by the way, he might be in the car. And I'm like, what? And they said, he might be in the car. And I was still relatively new. I probably only three years in the unit, and not realizing, like that was an afterthought. So we went to the police garage, and the car was sitting outside still. It wasn't in one of the indoor bays. So our policy at the time was the car has to be inside, and it has to wait for 24 hours to warm up. I remember it was relatively warm, so we said, we'll do it anyway.
Yeah,
so
that's to get accurate fingerprints and forensics off the car, correct?
Yeah, and there was no adverse conditions. There was the car wasn't wet. It wasn't raining out or anything or snowing. When did you say this was? Because
October 26th of 1999.
Almost 24 years ago, almost.
Yep. Coming up.
So we had the car put inside, and I got a pretty good nose for sniffing stuff. I remember specifically walking around the car sniffing it, and I'm like, he's not in here. So I was the assistant. I was not the assigned. My partner was the assigned. Usually two of us go. One takes notes and can pretty much do as much as the assistant or as the assigned does, and you're there in case if the case does get solved. The assigned is on vacation or out sick. The assistant can fill in and relay everything that he had done. So I remember specifically being in the back of the trunk, and I was writing the tag down, and the car was open, and so we didn't have to break into it. And my partner hit the trunk button, and when the trunk opened up, he came back, and I remember specifically writing down information on the car, and I hear, like out of the side of my ear, Johnny's in there. And I still kept writing, and he like yelled, John, he's in there. And I looked around and completely shocked that there was a body in the trunk.
And Ron Turchi was not a small guy. He's a big guy, correct? Briefly, if you can, within reasonable means, describe kind of the state he was in the trunk.
He was face down. He had a bag on his head, and he was hogtied, and he wasn't clothed.
You saw some other things in the car too. I'm familiar with the scene a little bit. So there were Viagra pills apparently sprinkled all over the trunk of the car. Am I right about that?
There were small blue pills that, at the time you don't know what they are. I guess we collected them and sent them up for chemical test on them. I don't know what they were specifically.
All right. And because we've talked about this briefly before, then I guess you might want to say all hell breaks loose, right? Now the body's in there. Who descends on that garage after that discovery is made? It's not a missing person anymore. It's a homicide.
Correct. And like I said, I don't think we had cell phones back then. So I had to go in and use the phone in the headquarters of the garage. And I called work, and I said, listen, man, he's in here. And I knew they were going to send more people up. And I remember calling homicide because I didn't want to go over the air as much as, how many people were going to get there.
Yeah.
Called homicide, and I believe one of the homicide detectives said, go over the air and tell them what you got. We need cops up there to to protect you guys
Mm-hmm.
and the garage, because
Mm-hmm.
who knows what could happen. You just opened up a trunk, and to your surprise, there's a dead body in the trunk.
Yeah. And for those who don't know, Ron Turchi was at the time a soldier in the Philadelphia Bruno Scarfo crime family, where Ralph Natal was the boss. At the time, Joey Merlino was in jail. Ralph actually was in jail um, at the time, and there was all kinds of speculation about why he was killed. That's Joe Legambi. He was the interim boss in around that time, at least according to the FBI. So there was a lot of speculation about what this was about, who was behind it, who did it, all those kind of things. But your focus was to get to the bottom of it using forensics. But I bet you had a lot of company real quickly. How quickly did that garage fill up with investigators?
I would say it once I went over the air and said we needed a couple cars up here. Um, Maybe 15 minutes. I think there was even helicopters up in the air, but we were inside the garage. Luckily, we didn't open it up outside the garage.
Yeah. Okay. Who shows up? Homicide detectives, FBI agents. I'm assuming the coroner's office, the medical examiner's office.
Everybody, it seemed like everybody in this city was in that one little bay at one point. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. So once the body's removed by the medical examiner's office, I won't get into the gruesome details because from what I know, they were pretty gruesome. You start looking for what? First, I'm guessing you're looking to see, is he shot? And then I'm guessing you're looking for evidence in the car, in the trunk, on the trunk, prints on the trunk, DNA on the trunk. What are you looking for in a mob hit scene like this, where you pop the trunk and inside is a dead mob guy?
Mainly, I mean, I kind of knew he was shot. We're not going to know he was definitely shot until he gets to the ME's office and they do their work. So they have a thing called a fluoroscope that if you send them down there and they can quickly X-ray the body, they can tell you there's bullets in them.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had that done at the time, so we knew he was shot. So you're looking for ballistics evidence. Maybe a bullet went through him. Maybe you can find the bullet. Maybe there's casings, because right now you don't even know where this occurred. Did they put him in the trunk and then shoot him? And then how did the car get where it had gotten? So, I mean, back then, I don't think we swabbed for touch DNA because I don't think it was around at the time. I mean, I can't tell you that 100%, but I don't think we did. So pretty much all we're doing is looking for ballistics, and then we're going to fingerprint the car. Right. Hopefully we get fingerprints off it.
And you took pictures, obviously, of the car, the body in the trunk, the condition of the body, that kind of thing. You did all that.
Yes. Yeah, we probably took, on a car, there's 4 corners of the car that we photograph, and then inside the car there's 4 general photographs that you would take: driver front, driver rear, passenger rear.
Right.
So there's usually 8 photographs that go with that. That's what I do. That's set in stone. Yeah. And then if you find anything else, like the body, a lot of photographs were photographed of the body. And the knots, the way they were tied.
Yeah.
And then we looked for ballistics evidence, but we didn't find any ballistics evidence.
All right. What about fingerprints? Do you remember? If you remember, I know this is a long time ago. It's 24 years ago. Do you remember, were there prints on the car, or can you take prints off a rope that was used to tie him up, or the bag that was used to put over his head?
I don't know. I'm sure we had done the bag at one time, but like when you collect anything like that out of the car or a scene, everything has to go to the ME's office, and they have to look at it first. I mean, we probably could have made a request to take the bag off, but it just wasn't a good idea at the time.
Yeah. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. You do all your work and stuff like that. It gets sent over to homicide detectives, I guess, and they get the evidence, and at some point it ends up over at the FBI, and everybody and their brother is looking at this murder because they're trying to figure out why Ron Turchi, who at one point might have been almost like underboss status, ends up dead in the trunk of a car. 24 years later, as you and I sit here, it's still not been solved and nobody's been charged. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I know when I first got to the unit, there was a lot of older guys that worked in the unit. Mm-hmm. They did not like handling mob jobs because it's such a secret society that there's usually never any witnesses. It's almost done. I mean, it's sad to say, business like this is just the way business is done.
Mm-hmm.
And you never. I mean, your ultimate goal is to go to court on these jobs that you somehow helped solve it, and we always found out that nothing ever went to court. And a lot of times, like everything you collected, all your work, the FBI would come in and take it from you or take it out of the unit. So we never, I know of one job that I think we ended up going to court on, and it was a later one. It was in an alley where it was like a really, really bad job.
Yeah.
There were witnesses, and that's the only mob job I ever remember us going to court on.
Yeah.
And
that's got to be, I guess, a little frustrating because you gather all the evidence you can and do all that, and it ends up in a box somewhere. And I know you probably know about this since you've been there a long time. Eventually, the FBI, if it doesn't go anywhere, they revisit it years later. They've been revisiting murders in the last 5 years, 5 or 6 unsolved murders, and they come back, I guess, and ask for the file and ask for the evidence all over again. And they want to look at it again. Am I right about that? And now they have unbelievable technology to get the DNA off the smallest possible surface. So it's a whole new day. Am I right?
Yeah, I would think so, but I think they already have it. Like I think they actually come in and take jurisdiction, and they already have all their evidence. So they never. And I know for 2 or 3 days after a job like that would happen, you just get bombarded by everybody because, they upset my bosses by saying, "Where's all this stuff at?" And then, it rolls downhill, and and you're not really. I mean, I don't want to say disinterested, but you know what's going to happen. So, we weren't big on mob murders.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you weren't big on mob murders, but since there's 5 or 6 unsolved ones, Philadelphia and folks who are mob watchers or follow organized crime are still interested in why these cases are not solved, what went on surrounding those cases. So, John, I appreciate you doing round 1 with us, but John's going to come back and do a few more mob murders. Some of them pretty notorious. The murder of Raymond Long John Martirano. We'll probably do that one next. That was rush hour on a winter afternoon, almost in Society Hill in Washington Square West, right there. Very high profile hit. We're going to talk about that the next time around. John, thanks for coming on this time and kind of walking us through how this gets done. And we look forward to having you come back.
Thanks, Dave.
All right. Good to see you, folks. That's it for Philly Prime and Mob Talk Sit Down for this week. Don't forget to come back next week because we're going to be talking about yet another mob hit and walk through the whole process of that. I'm sure it's going to be interesting and intriguing. And maybe we get a few little tidbits about something we didn't know before. But appreciate you listening and tune in next time. We'll see you again soon.